Okay.
Okay. So thank you all for being here for the July meeting of the Buffalo Society for Creativity in Medical Education. We have Dr. Michael Ackerbauer here. Um, you've read his bio. He's worked with large organizations in agile enterprise transformation, creative leadership. Um, he's also a certified rock balancer, and he's also an ordained minister. So it's
Okay.
Reverend Dr. Michael Ackerman. And he's a very, very dear friend. And so, and just an all-around good guy. So, Michael, it's all over to you, Dr. Ackerbauer, please. You have the floor. It's take it away. However you want to run it is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I've been friends with Dr. Firestein for many, many years. We go back a long ways, and I was very thrilled to be invited to join you today. The conversation I would like to have with you is about pervasive excellence, but more about how do we cultivate healthy teams at scale. And I did some research on some of your previous talks, so I'm going to borrow a little bit from a couple of one recent and one a couple of years ago talk from Dr. Gatewood. Um, Not so much more about me, but to give you some background, I spent 25 plus years at IBM. I worked with a lot of large corporate clients. I'm in the process of decorporatizing, but the frameworks that I've learned through agile ways of working and design thinking and how you scale excellence is from my corporate background. Yet it really does fit into medical education. I'm also teaching at Marist College in Buffalo State, so I have affinity for education as well. When I was doing work in Agile and design thinking, I called myself a dealer in hope. I was teaching people how to be good Scrum Masters and product owners for the work they did. And I find that a lot of teams struggle with how do we get better at what we do. And so the training we would do for clients and internal teams is all about um, making people feel like they've got something to contribute, and we all are in this together. And there's when we have a shared purpose, we can all excel. And then finally, yes, I'm a certified rock balancer, and it plays into this a little bit. But I want to talk for a moment about my identification with the medical field. This is not my. I want to tell you a short story. Um, 27 years ago, I received a self-esteem transplant in the form of a total hip replacement. I know that's not a hip, that's a partial knee replacement. But what I found in that moment was, in the medical field in particular, and my experience with it is that there's a wide variety of patient care and what it looks like and the experience that people go through. And at the team level, if you would, my surgeon was the best team I ever worked with when it was me and him. It was I went through multiple different specialists who said your congenital hip dislocated hip is not repairable, and you're probably better off waiting till you're in your 40s to get it replaced. And this guy came in, he was barely over 30. I was 29 at the time, and he said, "This work is a no-brainer." And he completely changed my mindset about what could be done medically for me. Um, if I've had, you can see I had a partial knee replacement here. I had a full replacement a couple of years ago. I've had a number of different interesting cases, medical cases. And so if I ever write a memoir, the title will be "You Never Want to Be Called Special by a Specialist." And why that plays here is I want to talk about healthy teams, but I'd like to ask you a question if you're willing to come off mic or talk to me in the chat. When you've worked with a really unique team, a really standout team, what's a characteristic you've seen that made it special? And I'm going to tie this to what does it look like to be a healthy team? If anybody's willing to come off mute, be brave, talk to me in chat.
Michael, I'll start.
Okay,
Humor, accountability, um, mutual respect,
good.
honesty.
Yep.
Charity just said mutual respect.
Mutual respect. Very good. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, and we've got an exceptional pediatric pulmonary team. And I think what we always do is we put the patient and the families first, so that kind of higher common purpose.
I love it. Love it. patient first. I'm going to add that to the chat. And higher common purpose. That's great, Dan. Thank you. That sounds like you read my speaker notes ahead of time. Appreciate that. Okay, thank you. One of the VPs I worked with, the design executive at IBM, measured special this way. I can already tell which of my teams will deliver a great experience just by watching the way they work. And I would say you could hear and see mutual respect in the wild. You can see patient first. You can see higher common purpose, accountability. And so I want to dig into a little bit of your context with this question that I looked at over hundreds of teams I worked with and probably thousands of agile coaches that we trained and scrum masters in our learning. I want to talk about the characteristics of teams that lead to impactful outcomes so that other teams can replicate their success. We always got questions when we would teach agile ways of working in IBM and to clients. They'd say, "This is great, Mike, when you look at how this team works and how to make it even better than it is and outperform its expectations. How do you scale that?" And the answer is always start with one team first. Start where you are and take these characteristics and these qualities you mentioned that make them special and apply them here and see how it works. But you have some examples that I want to draw from your community. And two, I want to build on the talk that Amy Clymer did with you a couple months ago. I went back and I watched her video. I talked to her a couple weeks ago and I told her I was speaking to all of you and she said she just did. So I thought, great, I want to hear what she said because I read her book and I love her work. And I actually drew heavily on her work in my dissertation research. There's three core components of every healthy team, and I think you've heard these before. One is team purpose. I'm going to reframe it a little bit differently than Amy did. I ask these questions of teams when we're talking about what's our shared purpose. One is what are we responsible for as a team? That is a collective that answers to that higher common purpose that you mentioned, Dan. And then individually, how are we willing to engage with each other and align to that core purpose or those common goals? Number two is team process. How will we ensure novelty and diversity of thought in a sustainable way? And by that, I mean, we talk go ahead, Dan. No, didn't. Okay. We would talk about teams as needing, we called it multidisciplinary cross-functional teams, meaning there's one of every discipline. There's a multiplicity of disciplines and focal areas that go to the higher level purpose. So a software development team wouldn't just be software developers. It would also be marketing people, design people, finance people, legal people, people who represent the end-to-end value proposition of what the team would deliver to a customer or client. But the sustainability here is the key, is how do we ensure we're producing something with a sense of predictability? And then three, finally, the team dynamic. How will we be together to achieve our shared goals? And I think it was in Amy's talk that somebody mentioned we're an institution. An institution works a certain way, and it doesn't change. And I heard Sarah Thurber chime in and say, when change is introduced to people who are maybe not as amenable to change as others, you get emotional reactions. And that's where the team dynamic comes into play. When we say, how do we feel about how do we want to be together? It's how do we feel about what we're doing together? I'll take a breath, ask you to consider a team, maybe even the one if you were in Amy's call a couple months ago, the team that you were thinking about when she went through the purpose process and dynamic construct with you, and think about a team that was special. What of the three of these would you character if you mentioned in chat or called it out? Which of these would you say resonates with you that made that team special? Was it related to purpose? Was it related to process? Or was it related to dynamic? And I see we have some new people joining. Thank you. We're talking about healthy teams, and the anatomy of a healthy team is this core construct that Amy published in her book and her dissertation. But healthy to me also means special. There was something about it that you'd say, man, I wish I could replicate that somewhere else. The process. Okay. It was process related that made it special. Interesting. Cool. Purpose and dynamic. Okay. Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Okay. So healthy teams have to have this balance, and there comes the certified rock balancer concept. Every team, every rock that I've ever balanced, and it's true, it's possible to do, to make rocks stand on end. They need a common center of gravity. That's what we would call the team purpose. Why do we exist? And as I would take a couple of rocks, um, and work with them, you could feel where gravity was pulling them in order or pulling them away from the rock didn't want to stand. And the process, the purpose is what aligns everybody on a team. That's our, you could call a center of gravity. The process is the way in which we figure out how are we going to do this job and how are we going to do it in a way that we can measure sustainability and predictability. And the dynamic is how do we get along when rocks come together really well? There's a moment where a rock will click. You can feel the rocks moving and agreeing or disagreeing on the gravity, but then essentially there's a point at which there's 3 points of balance typically on every rock that it happens and it's there. And so a dynamic is how do we know we've clicked as a team? And I think that's when you really figure out what special looks like. But the metrics I would throw by, oops, I went too far. Let's go back. There we go. Okay. How we know if we're on purpose, if our process is working, if we have a good dynamic, we can measure it in 3 ways. Number one is what we call doing the right work. How do we know that the work we're doing is the most impactful it could be? It's adding value. It's something that whoever's receiving it gets benefit from. What is what we would call our effectiveness measure. How do we know that we're on purpose and what we're producing is what the patient or the student or the stakeholder in the community is looking for? And then two, are we doing the work right? That's our efficiency statement. How do we know that we have a way of doing things that's repeatable and measurable in terms of being consistent in what we produce? Whether or not it has value or impact is a component of are we doing the right work? Are we moving toward the right goals? That right purpose statement, I think, Dan, you said a higher common purpose. Is this leaning toward that higher purpose? And then three, are we doing the work well? Do we feel engaged? How engaged do we feel about the work? Because if we don't have good engagement, chances are we'll either skimp on the quality or we won't necessarily be aligned to or care about the purpose. So the purpose, true north, the process, the way in which we are consistent in what we deliver and how we deliver it, and the dynamic is to what degree am I bringing my whole creative self to the team? So let me rephrase the earlier question. When you think about these metrics, where would you say your team, same context as the ones that you mentioned previously, or you're thinking of earlier, where would you say you feel like the team I'm on or the team I thought was especially special? Which of those metrics would you say, yeah, I recognize that, or that really stood out to me? Is it doing the right work, doing the work right, or doing the work well? If you're brave, you can come off mute. Otherwise, love to see in the chat what you're thinking. Roger, you mentioned process. How did you know that the process was working well? How did you know you were doing the work right?
Because the outcome was great. I mean, if we
Okay.
if we took care of the process, the outcome was great. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. And could you dig into that a little bit with me, Roger? What did the process look like for you?
Well, I mean, this is the team that I work with when I do the books, and
Yeah.
the process was, I mean, we're honest, we were collaborative, we had a lot of fun. Also, we met deadlines, and then we were able to correct and make changes as we needed to. And there was this tremendous amount of respect with the three of us on the team.
Okay. Okay. So making changes sounds like continuous learning, continuous
Right,
improvement,
right,
worked well together. That sounds like a dynamic. And the
right,
purpose is we wanted to produce a really quality book.
right.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll continue.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Can you? My name is Sharon. Sorry, I was a little bit late jumping in, and I'm in the car, so I
Hi,
can't
Sharon.
type. Um,
That could be some of the
hi.
things that are going on here.
No worries.
Yeah, sorry. But, you know, I think for me, when we engaged, so I have a pretty small team, which is nice, but when we engaged, we there was not a lot of trust in the process that was being
Mhm.
built. And so
Okay.
the other it's taken a few years to get the trust and respect for the work, right? And we've centered it in
Mhm.
all the right places. One of the real problems we have is it's really hard for us to measure outcomes in the work that we're doing because it's long-term mortality data, long-term morbidity data. So how do you and for me, it's like my team is engaged, but because we can't really see the impact of what we're doing, how do I keep that engagement when we know that the measurements are going to come? They're just going to take a while.
Michael, I think you're muted.
I somehow lost my connection for a second there. Sharon, I heard the question, but could you give me that background a little bit again? It was how do we know, how do we keep that enthusiasm, engagement while we know metrics are coming? Could you say
Right.
more about the metrics?
So metrics are kind of big for us because we are a regional oversight team for
Okay.
perinatal outcomes in Western New York.
Okay.
And we travel to our hospitals. And every year we have to be on site at least once a year, but we meet
Okay.
with them 2 times a year and sometimes more.
Okay.
And I think it's been great because my team does see so we can measure the engagement of our outreach through the engagement of the teams that we're meeting with. And that's
Okay.
definitely increased. And I have to keep celebrating that.
Okay.
It's the data to keep all of our teams together and aligned in the work so that we know the impact of where we're leading is 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 doing something and keeping people engaged because
Yeah.
I feel like in healthcare it takes so long to move things
Yeah.
and you lose a little bit of that.
Right. So I would ask the question for who we're working with and how we're engaging them and helping them engage. How do those metrics or that data, how does that relate to the metrics you're being or the outcomes you're being measured against? So I would ask, how do I know that the engagement I'm doing is relating to whatever we're getting measured on later? Is there a disconnect there?
A lot of that depends on the transparency of the teams with us
Okay.
and how they're sharing what's happening.
Okay.
And a lot of that's really sensitive, and a lot of it we have to really get into bad outcomes at times. And so the trust is really important to me. And, we don't
Right.
do a blame and shame, and we don't compete on quality. Like we really push that out there that we're all here to teach and learn and share with each other.
Right.
And, as the RPC, we still learn from our affiliates, no matter what level.
Right.
And we celebrate that with them.
Okay.
So that's one
Okay.
thing we can do.
Okay. Okay. We're going to come to it in a minute, but trust, there's some components that are fundamental to trust, and the first one is transparency. And so how transparent are we or the people you're engaging in terms of sharing what needs to be shared and doing it in a way that it's kept confidential, kept in confidence, right? But transparency is huge in healthy teams and in teams that want to get better at what they do and measure for continuous improvement. So um, that's where I'd start is what can we share, what's shareable, and how do we build that better level of capability to share with each other. That's probably a team by team or a location by location conversation, I would think. And is that what you're finding? It depends on where you are and who you're talking to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I will also tell you, we came in behind a leader that was, I'm going to say, pretty authoritarian
Mm,
with her approach with our
okay.
affiliates. So there was almost zero trust when we started.
Okay.
And, that was 5 years ago. So I would say we've come a long way,
Good.
but it's keeping them engaged, right?
Sure.
And keeping that trust and
Yeah.
maintaining that as we go out every year without,
Right.
I'm gonna call out New York State because they don't help us. But there's a lot of data lags for the work we're doing, and they know and we know, and we're all kind of tied to that weight from New York State to get what we need.
Sure.
But I don't know. I do know that I don't know if it's like the midlife crisis, or the 5-year hump or whatever you want to call it, but it feels like we're all exhausted and we're
Uh,
trying to figure out how to stay engaged in the work.
yeah. Yeah. I will. I'm gonna draw actually from some of Dr. Gatewood's work, and I see your hand up. So I want to hear your thoughts as well. Um, always engagement hinges on why does this matter to me individually, and why does this matter to us as a team, as an entity? And so whatever it is, the purpose, your purpose for what New York State is asking for versus your purpose for how do I help your team, your context and stakeholders, how do I help you grow? How do I help you thrive? How do I help you get better at what you do? They may or may not align, but the more you can align, I need these metrics, but here's why it matters for you, not necessarily for the state. So if you can find that sense of alignment for those teams, especially where maybe trust is low because of previous leadership, that's a way to begin the process towards gaining trust. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks for sharing, Sharon. Dr. Gatewood, glad to meet you. I was listening to your talk from a while ago, and I'm glad to have you here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Good morning. Thank you. Sorry to be late. And that was an excellent question, Sharon. And that kind of speaks to what my thoughts are. I I think that how the members of the group connect is the most important thing. Not just communicate, but actually connect. How each member respects one another. They all feel valued. They feel like their input is valued, um, and because it's not about the final. It's not necessarily to me. It's not necessarily all about the final goal, which obviously is important. And in Sharon's case, the goal may be way down the road.
Mm,
So there's a journey. This is an overused term, but there's a journey as things go on, and it's the daily that daily journey that people want to really enjoy. And if they are enjoying the members of the team, and everyone on the team, like I said, everyone on the team feels like they're being heard, they're being valued, then I think to me that's the key. I know Roger's heard me say this 1,000 times, but culture is the most important thing. And I think being able to connect with one another can build a wonderful culture and make that journey wonderful. And so in Sharon's case, even though the goal is way down the road, if she talked about someone who was a very authoritarian, I can just imagine that people didn't feel like they had any say or weren't being heard or valued. So to me, and that goes back to the team dynamic, I think team dynamic is the most important to me personally.
sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. Anybody else? Thoughts on where you've seen this play out in your team, your context, where it was exemplary, or in Sharon's case, not exemplary. That's also valid. No? Okay. So there's some I care about metrics only because it's a way to dig into some of the challenges that say Sharon you're facing on teams. In some examples that we've used in the wild with teams is how frequently do we deliver outcomes to our stakeholders? Meaning, how consistent are we? How predictable are we? How do we know we're producing something with a sense of regularity or forecasting? And then that goes to the process, does it drive work? And then does it matter, or how impactful or valuable is it? How satisfied are our stakeholders with our outcomes? And then finally, as a team, how do we feel about the outcomes we deliver? In this case, I agree with you, Dr. Gatewood, that certainly the connection of a team, how do we want to be together is a core concept to bring the team together, to understand whether or not we're being frequent, whether or not we're being consistent in what we provide. And for those whom we provide it, that they're finding value in it, they're finding impact, or moving from an output to an outcome to even something that is impactful. And so I wanted to frame this. One, I'd like to ask you, what kinds of metrics do you use today? What kinds of ways do you look at, let's say, engagement and connection, the ways in which you do the process, satisfaction of the outcome for the stakeholder to whom you're providing it? What metrics do you use today, or what qualitative, not quantitative? How do you know that it's impactful? How do you know that it's a good process? How do you know that there is, as Dr. Gatewood said, that good connection? Anyone care to share? I haven't checked chat lately.
So I would go back to individual patient outcome.
Okay.
I think one of the challenges is data, and it's what motivates people are, some people are motivated by data, some people are motivated by stories. So I
Yep.
think it's balancing that data and the stories. And I think when we lose the patient story, then we lose the motivation.
Sure. Sure. I appreciate that. Yes, that's really, why are we here? We're here for the patient, right? So how do we know that we're doing right by the patient? My doctor did right by me when he said to me, this litany of surgeons came to me and said, one said, in the early 80s, replacing your hip is a 50-50 proposition, and probably we're just going to have to fuse it. Well, it didn't sound like an outcome I really was excited about. And then the doctor that really was the catalyst for this for me from the patient side, it was my GP, and I went and I said, I've got this chronic pain. I can't function with the pain I'm experiencing. He said, I'm not the specialist here, but what I want to do is I want to do a holistic view of your case, and I want to talk to all the right specialists for you. And he put me in touch with an orthopedic practice local to me, where one of the key partners said, you have 2 of the 3 conditions by which I would say you're a candidate for hip replacement. And the third is you don't have it yet, which is you can't operate without a cane or a wheelchair. But we have a new guy who's come in out of Boston, and he's really sharp, he's really young, and he's got some more aggressive ways, or some more different ways of thinking about it. So I want to refer you to him. And this guy, who's maybe just 30 at the time, came in, looked at my case, said, this is a no-brainer. We can do this. Which was, an immediate paradigm shift for me, because everybody has said no, or not yet, or it's not going to be what you think it is. And he said, I can do this, and I'll give you a 90% chance of the joint lasting you for over 20 years. For me, it's been 27 years, and post-op, he said, I expect this to last your lifetime. And he has. So Dan, your sense of what the patient's story is and what the patient's expectations are really resonates as a way to understand, are we moving in the right direction? So thank you for that. Anybody else? Okay. So one more thing I want to add, and this may or may not be helpful in your context, but a way in which you can help determine how well are we working toward those core healthy components. Principles of teamwork that I have found really speak to doing the right work, doing the work right, and doing the work well. When a team has clarity of outcome, and it could be a story, it can be a very what's the word I'm looking for? Aspiring, inspirational kind of mission, which we'll come to in a minute. Clarity of outcome. What does it look like if we deliver good care to our patient? What does it look like if we produce really exceptional physicians in our education program? Iteration over perfection. Can we work in a way that we can get better incrementally over time? And as we iterate from, we call it sprints, 1 week at a time, 2 weeks at a time, up to a month at a time. If we can operate in segmented ways where we can control for time and see how we improve in the same process, in the same ways of working or working in the same outcomes, and measure them over time, there's the data that goes with the clarity of outcome story. And then if we can do it in a self-directed way where we as a team have autonomy, we don't have to ask permission from supervisors or managers to make incremental improvements on what we do and how we do it. Now we can see where it's engaging us even more. There's a resource that I really like, an author by the name of Teresa Amabile, a book called The Progress Principle. And actually it's a pretty good read for Sharon in particular, some of what you shared with people's sense of, is this valuable to me, and do I want to share, and how do I trust, and how do we better connect and engage? And a study that she and her husband did looked at hundreds and hundreds of people across multiple organizations and asked them every day an anonymous essay question. They just said, tell us something that stood out to you about your day today. And all of the people who came back, they found had one of two ways that they thought about their day. One was either there were nourishers for their day or there were toxins for their day, meaning in their inner work life, when they felt engaged, when they felt they were doing the right work, they were doing the work right, they felt like they were making meaningful progress, incremental progress towards important goals. And so these principles of teams, and Dr. Gatewood, I really would love to hear how you've seen this play out in some of your work. As teams feel that they're autonomous enough, they're connected, their voice is heard, they might want to try things a new way, and it might inspire them even more towards what is it we're trying to accomplish here. And every team is founded on a set of non-negotiable values that have to be called out early and often. These are not the sum total, but we used an acronym ROCKET: respect, openness, courage, empathy, and trust. Respect for one another as humans, respect for the patient, respect for individuals, respect for our peers, that we're all here to do a job, and we're all here to do meaningful things. Openness to new ideas, openness to criticism of those ideas. Courage to stand up and say, I think we have a values violation, or I think we could do something different or better than we're doing today. And I'd really like to see us try something new or address it. Empathy for one another that says, I put myself in your shoes, and I recognize that what you bring to the table is as important as what I do. And I want to be very empathetic ultimately to the patient. And then trust in one another that we're bringing our best selves together and we can participate in ways that could make us vulnerable, but we know that it's safe to do so. Question here for you. What values have you seen on the healthy or special teams you've been on? What values stand out to you? One I saw earlier, Charity, you said mutual respect. Look, it's right there, the first one.
Yeah, and I would say all of them are important, but also
Yeah,
trust. I think trust goes with that respect. The two go hand in hand.
yeah,
Because I think if there's something lacking there, then
yeah,
all those other things really can't
yeah,
happen.
yeah. You're right. Amy, Dr. Clymer mentions trust as part of the dynamic that there's two terms. One is psychological safety. I like the term participative safety. It's safe enough for me to engage in ways that maybe I wouldn't have in the past, or maybe I'm not as comfortable doing, but I feel with my team, there's enough engagement here that I'm not going to get penalized or for speaking up or trying something new, for taking a risk. Thank you. Anybody else? Listening actively and fully is respect in action. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Listening's huge. Listening to hear and understand rather than listening to respond, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Have you seen any of these process principles in play? Oh, Dan, Dr. Gatewood, go ahead.
Yeah, I like the term empathy
Yeah.
of all those. And you've mentioned a couple of very key things, I think, Mike. Uh, Putting yourself in the other person's shoes. I think if we're talking about the team that you create with your patient and their family and loved ones, whatever, um, in our class at the medical school, we say, lead with empathy, treat with compassion.
Hmm.
That is doing exactly what you said, Mike, and that is putting yourself in the shoes of the patient first, listening, listening to their story, because patients want to be heard.
Yep.
And giving them the time to do that, and really learning their backstory so that you can treat them in a very holistic way, in a biopsychosocial way. So yeah, leading with empathy is probably, to me, the most important.
Thank you for that.
Can I just add that
Please.
um, I think the other quality is vulnerability, because
Hmm.
until unless you're willing to be vulnerable, it kind of precedes courage. And
Yeah,
a team that is, that encourages vulnerability is one that sort of bonds together better, I think.
I agree. I agree. Thank you. Yeah, in order to see people be vulnerable, one must model vulnerability to them. If I can do it, you're saying I welcome your trust in me by trusting in you before I know if I can. And then trust that others will come alongside that as well. Thank you. That's terrific. Anybody else? Okay, well, Dr. Gatewood, you didn't know this walking in, but I'm going to do a little case study of what you shared. I think it was a couple of years ago now. I was looking at some of the models that you've proposed and some of the programs that you've introduced, and I thought, wow, I don't see many teams that have understood the team dynamic well enough to say I can, in fact, it is possible to scale this. And so I really appreciate that you went ahead of me and did the heavy lifting for me. So thank you. I wanted to look at a little bit of what you've shared with this community around how can this be scaled? I don't know that you ever use the word. And frankly, when we would talk with clients about scaling agile ways of working, inside I would kind of roll my eyes because it meant something completely different. And in fact, there's frameworks for scaled agility that really don't promote what we're talking about as core team health and core team essentials. So when I saw what you were doing, I I wanted to break down every single model, but I limited myself to two. What I look here is here's a shared purpose. How do we collectively provide the best value-based cardiac care? So you started in the cardiac center. And then I don't know if you can see my cursor. I'm looking at the co-management program. And essentially, if I look at the hub and spoke here, and I would say if we call that a team model for intentional service, for consultative service, for electrophysiology and non-invasive services, you're saying let's clone what the team model looks like, or the way in which the team paradigm, if you will. So at a very high level, we're talking about doing the right work in the sense of everyone is going to adopt the same model of what we look like. And then the components of co-management as a program, if essentially doing the right work of the services, these are the four core services we offer in the cardiac program. Terrific. Okay. And here's how they all look. We started with one, or we normalized the best model of one to the others. Terrific. So we took what was working well from other effective teams, and so let's apply that here and borrow brilliance where there's better impact and better outcomes. Components of co-management program: quality care process, cost efficiency, access outreach, teaching, research, innovation. Every single program will have the same core components, which means not only will we do the right work, we can measure them based on these 6 dimensions, but it also says we're doing the work right in the sense of what is it, how are we producing the value in that service. Stop me. I'm going to stop and see if this resonates with you, Dr. Gatewood, because it's your model. But I wanted to overlay the concept of the anatomy of healthy teams onto how you're saying it can and is can be scaled and it is being scaled.
Well, I'm very humbled that you're using this. Believe me, I'm flattered. But yeah, I'm very interested to hear what you say about it.
Okay, so I'll take it one step further. And because most teams I worked with were at the granular level, if we say in the interventional services program, the STEMI service in particular, we have a very distinct metric. And that is, and I love this, time is muscle. I absolutely love that. It's it plays so well. It's such an effective image to me of how do I know if we're taking care of the patient in the right way at the right time. And so I'm looking at this. Maybe if I turn this sent on its head, it'd be kind of a funnel. This is at a very high level, or did you say street level, rooftop view, and then I forget 10,000 foot view. The services on the far left are the 10,000 foot view, and then the components of the program is the street view, and then or the rooftop view, and then here's the street view. So what I say about this collectively is there's a traceability of value that now we know we're getting it right because we borrowed from the best service model there was. We applied it to the other services and normalized or standardized on those core services and said they're going to look the same and they're going to operate the same with a different true north goal to them: intervention, consultation, electrophysiology, or non-invasive service. Those are our paradigm that we serve, but the metrics by which we serve them, quality, care, process, the other four dimensions, are the same. So it's a different outcome with a different value proposition, but everything else is largely identical. And that's how we know there's value there. And then down at the core program service level, we've got metrics to know how are we doing the work right. If I know that I'm doing the work right and I know I'm doing the right work, um, lead with as we talked earlier about making sure everyone's voice feels heard. But if I see that my voice is being heard, I want to operate in a way that says, I think we can improve the process. I think we can be better aligned to the true north, the value statement. But what's core is that at this granular level for teams that haven't scaled or aren't sure, if you're thinking about any of your teams that in the past or current, I don't know how it would scale. The first thing you need to understand from a how do I know I can get better as a team or build on this is, can I trace what we do and how we do it to something that's impactful to the student or the patient? And I know that going to that level of value of outcome, I know that I can build on this because I know that the people who are receiving what I'm providing, I'm also getting feedback from them on how to get it better, make it better. Questions or thoughts? I talked too much there, but that's how I interpreted your models and for the cardiac program. Okay. Hopefully I'm hoping that I'm hearing gears turning, like I want to figure out what my traceability value is, or I know what my traceability of value is for the program that I lead. But I think this is a really excellent model to show how it can be over time replicated in a way that is sustainable at scale. Okay, take one more step. Now this is a macro view of the more micro view of, can I take one team with a really solid um, clarity of outcome, with a really solid iterative process, with autonomy enemy teams, and a team that feels empowered to do the best work they can. Now it's at a leadership level, which I wasn't even going to get into today. It was just going to be from a team perspective. But because you've paved a way here, I wanted to show how then it can replicate at the multi-program level. What I see here is teams, the rotational aspect of the programs, and this one I didn't get into as deeply in watching the video, but the concept here is, if if this program and this program and this program are all working the same way with their multiple services measured on the same 6 core functions or areas of focus in the program, now what we're saying is all of those programs are loosely coupled to each other, but tightly aligned to the same mission, the same true north, the same guiding principle that says of all the programs across all of the education we provide, it's still all adding up to the same outcome at this higher level. So this 10,000-foot level, as opposed to the rooftop level, as opposed to the team level of, are we doing the right work? And how I looked at that was, here's our moonshot. We create value-based medical and healthcare education that improves the healthcare, and the healthcare delivery of the community of Western New York and beyond. That is a massive moonshot thought that I saw playing out in this model, and this model. What are we doing here? We're collectively providing the best value-based cardiac care, and it worked for cardiac. So why couldn't it work for other programs? Okay, well, it could work in the management program. It could be an integrated model of components. Yes, kudos for the creativity and innovation call out. Yes, and then the co-management program. It can be done with all of them because at scale, we're still going after the same high-level goal, the same high-level mission that says we want to provide the best to our region. And oh, by the way, we're so aspirational, we want to go even beyond that. And at the most granular level where all the gears mesh, at the most micro level of the team, we can show you how it can be done in a way that connects the team members first, gives them opportunity to trust and be vulnerable with one another, to build a team that says, yeah, we want to do the best work possible. What does that look like? This is our mission statement for our team or our organization, our program. These are the services we provide. This is the process we use, and we measure them by stories and data. And then we know if we're hitting the right marks. Are we getting the right feedback from the right people? And then, yeah, we can trace that across more than one program, more than one service. I'm wondering how other teams have seen this happening. If so, Dr. Gatewood, if you would, it was a couple of years ago, I think you shared this with this community. How is that going?
Well, I'm semi-retired now, so I
Okay,
can't
so it's going well then.
I can't really speak to it, but
Okay.
yeah, I can tell you though, it was a complete shift of what we were doing before.
Okay.
And I think it was very helpful in creating the Gates Vascular Center that we have here.
Mhm.
And again, you didn't, if we drill down even further, when you get into the groups, um, uh, we would have representatives from all of
Right. Yeah.
disciplines. I don't know if you're going to talk about that, but to me, again, that was giving everyone on the team a voice.
Yep.
So everybody felt valued.
Mm.
I just, again, going back to creating a culture that where people feel valued, they feel heard, they feel they're part of it. I like that. You said moonshot mission. It reminds me when John F. Kennedy went to NASA to visit because we were in this race to the moon with Russia. And when he was walking around the grounds there, he ran into a janitor.
Yes.
He asked the janitor, what do you do here, sir? And the janitor said, well, Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon. And to me, that just resonates so loudly because that's what everybody wants to feel like they're part of that mission. They're part of that goal that everybody's shooting for. And that he actually felt valued, even though he may not be an engineer or a scientist or anything, but he had a part to play. And
Yeah.
and it was he felt valued, and I love that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's perfect. Dan.
Yeah, I agree with Robert. And there's that saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, eats mission for breakfast. But I think it also eats higher common purpose for lunch. Are there metrics of 5 to 10 questions where you can assess your team's culture?
There's actually a 10 dimension assessment you could give people, one to scale 1 to 10. How are we on openness? How are we on debate? How are we on acceptance of ideas by a researcher named Ekval? So I give you 10 for sure.
Oh, that's more than enough. When I
Okay.
think surveys, if you can keep them down to 5 to 10,
Oh yeah, yeah, it can be done. Yeah.
great.
Um,
If you can circle back and maybe email that out, I think it'd be really kind of valuable to play with on a couple of the teams that I work with.
sure, sure, happily. Yeah, thank you.
And that's also an inventory that's available commercially, so you can
Yep.
actually get that and use it. So yeah.
But I can share a version of it for sure. Absolutely. So then I think I might have aggregated what I was hearing in previous talks, but I love also the concept of the snowball effect and what really I didn't connect it in the recording so much as just now when you said everyone's seen, everyone heard, and I think Charity and Dr. Mishra also said similarly, people need to know they can trust you and you need to demonstrate that they're feeling seen and heard from an empathy perspective. Um, the idea that we're not just building, we're producing healthier communities. And that's what I saw in the grander scale, which I was going to bring that last model in as well. Um, to that question then, or to that thought, and because we talked earlier about trust, to say we can scale healthy teams or have pervasive excellence, we have to be transparent about who we are, what we do, how we work, especially in the process. But how are we cultivating openness and mutual respect to promote measurable and clear outcomes? How are we being accountable? Somebody mentioned that earlier. Seeking feedback, acknowledging mistakes, and trying new ways of working. You can't be accountable if you're not transparent. And it's really hard to have trust if you're not accountable to one another, which is empowering. One way of looking at trust is empowering ourselves to be self-directed, to take risks, to try something new and see if it works, to do educated experiments, hypotheses of what could happen. In the engineering world, instead of saying let's do a hypothesis and confirm or disconfirm, the engineers I worked with would say, how do we limit the blast radius if we try something different? That could work here too in medicine, but how do we empower teams to be self-directed, to take risks and help navigate failures without punishment? And when you deal with authoritarian leadership, I could understand why there'd be some residual or continual kind of sense of, I don't know if I want to be risky because I could get hammered. So to be excellent or to be super healthy, to be special as a team, you might even just say these are core values. I'm just amplifying them to say they represent all of the anatomy of healthy teams. And I think we've heard accountability, we heard trust a lot. I don't know if we heard transparency. I major on that when talking about how frequently are we delivering value or outcomes is efficiency breeds effectiveness. But people won't care about being more efficient if they don't care about why they do what they do. I appreciate that you've really I came here to share some thoughts with you and I'm learning along with you. So that's bonus that you're right. Make sure your teams feel seen, feel heard. Then you know where the problems are. Then you know where the opportunities are because then they'll share. I have two more slides and they're quick, but any other thoughts? One more. I appreciate your time. There's proof that rocks can stand on end and defy gravity. But it's and there's a TED Talk. If you type in that link, you'll see me talk about teamwork as embodied by rocks standing on end in an unearthly manner.
Michael, are you sharing that slide with the rocks? Because we're not seeing
Yeah,
it.
you can't see it?
Nope, nope. Let's see
Uh-oh.
it.
Uh-oh.
Let's see those
Here.
rocks.
Okay, here we go. Oops. I had the wrong slide. There we go. There we are.
Still not seeing it.
Really? Did I stop sharing? I don't know how, I'm sorry. I don't know how I stopped sharing.
There we
There we
go.
go. Okay.
Great.
I'm really grateful for your time and the lively conversation. Thank you, Dr. Gatewood, for doing the heavy lifting for me. Um, it's really remarkable and exciting to see healthy teams scaling in the wild.
Michael, thank you very much. Any final comments or questions for Dr. Ackerbauer? Okay, we got hearts coming up from Archita, so we're doing good.
Very nice.